how to beat the World Economic Forum and to own everything and be even happier in 2030. Now, there's a lot to be worried about in the world today. The World Economic Forum, the globalists, the attack on energy, the attack on food, the attack on our money. From all sides, we feel the pressure. However, big problems equal big opportunities. Bigger problems equal even bigger opportunities. And I know a lot of you feel defeated, you feel like a victim, but I am going to have a conversation with my good friend Ryan Daniel Moran. A little bit of a debate. We're going to talk about how big this problem is. He doesn't see it as big as I do. We're going to talk about that. And then part two, we're going to get into the massive opportunity that we both see and we both agree. And we're going to break it down step by step. And I think most people could make $1 million next year with these ideas and this opportunity. It's that big. So we're going to go through that problem, solution, problem, opportunity. You don't want to miss this. Let's go ahead and just jump right into it with Ryan Daniel Moran. Ryan Daniel Moran, thanks so much for joining me today. This is a very long overdue interview. I'm excited for this conversation. I've been a big fan of yours for a long time. I know you've been watching my stuff, so I love it when it comes together like that. A couple things that I want to talk about just for the audience. One, you have been on a mission helping people create businesses and create like financial freedom for themselves, branding, stuff like that. And I want to talk to you about that because I see this massive opportunity in the market that I want to kind of move into, and I want to talk about that. And then I know you want to talk about, some of the bigger things in World Economic Forum and the direction that the world is going and things like that. So let's start there. And the reason why I want to start there is because I think when it comes to business and branding and, how do I take care of my own personal finances, I have to navigate the bigger piece of what's going on in the world. And the reason why I say that is my story was I started buying bank-owned repos in 1995 from the banks, fixing and flipping homes, made a bunch of money. I started a couple different businesses, selling e-commerce in 2001. Doing e-commerce was not easy. I started a medical equipment business, Fortune 500 exits, but I sold everything and I was all in on real estate in Southern California. And in 2008, when the great financial crash happened, it didn't work out very well for me. Let's just say it actually worked out very bad. And the reason why I want to start with that story is because there was external forces like this global financial system that I wasn't paying attention to that affected what I was doing in my micro view of my businesses. And so I now, trying to learn from my mistakes, I try to keep a picture on the whole geopolitical picture so then I can navigate within that. Does that make sense?
Perfect. That makes perfect sense. I think that's the healthy balance that is the appropriate balance to strike. Whereas a lot of our peers are absolutely obsessed with the macro story, and I happen to think that they're very, very wrong. There's a very pessimistic view of the macro story, and I think it's the wrong view. Whereas if you're going to be an entrepreneur, if you're going to be a successful business owner, you have to keep the optimistic view. The macro story is always optimistic. There's more abundance today than there was 20 years ago. And there's in alignment with the entire story of capitalism. Ever since the 1700s, when capitalism took over in what are now first world countries, we have a consistent trend of growth, of solving problems, of more abundance, and that hasn't changed. And so where I see a lot of our peers getting it wrong is that they have a very pessimistic view on the overall climate and the overall opportunity, whereas I think we have more opportunity than ever.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there, and a lot of this is going to be speculation. But here's where I would go. So first of all, yeah, you cannot be an entrepreneur without being optimistic, and I know you work with a lot of would-be aspiring entrepreneurs, and I have friends and family I talk to about ideas, and a lot of times they're like, yeah, but this bad thing's going to happen, and this bad thing's going to happen, right? And I'm like, yeah, all that will happen, and I don't care, right? And so if you're not optimistic, you can't start a business. So right off the bat.
That's right.
I would also say, just to kind of set some frame on this, is that I have said many times, and I still believe, I am super bullish on what happens when millions of entrepreneurs' backs are against the wall. I'm super bullish on that.
Yeah, no joke. And like, first of all, 100%. And second of all, the only back you need to have against the wall is your own. Because there's so much abundance, so much that is available to entrepreneurs that if you manage your focus and your mindset and your habits, you can't not win. But you're absolutely right that the world changes real darn fast when you've got millions of them against the wall.
That's where I would disagree just a little bit. Back to my original story, like I was focused on myself. I ran my businesses really well. I was really good at making money, but there were external forces that affected me that I didn't see. So that's kind of where it is a little bit.
But didn't that put your back against the wall? Didn't that setback make you put your back against the wall?
Yeah. I had no choice but to die or survive, right?
Right, and you won big.
And I did well. I knew how to make money. I just had to figure out this new environment. But let's talk about. So let's start with this big picture. So a couple things. One, if we go back to the 1700s and all the way forward, and just looking at modern history, call it the last 70, 80 years. Obviously there's been financial crashes all the time, the dot-com boom and the 2008 boom, and all these things. But I would say that typically I would frame that up as saying that. The crash has happened, but the leaders, the powers that be, whoever, have typically wanted things to get better. So things crashed, but hey, let's fix it. Let's make things better, and let's keep progressing. And what I'm mostly concerned with in terms of World Economic Forum and globalism and so forth is I believe we're at a point now in time where the global leaders actually don't want things to improve. They actually want them to get worse. And so let me give you a couple points on that. So, for example, the energy crisis that we're in globally, right? So they do not want to manage for human flourishment. They're trying to actually destroy human flourishment. They believe that any impact on the world is bad.
That's you realize that's speculation.
Well, it's not. I mean, this is all written down. It's not speculation at all. Like
we can go into that in a second. I would challenge that. But we can go into
so we can go into that. So. It's all written down, and so like them trying to shut down farms in Holland, or like what they did in Sri Lanka, or what they've done in Europe, right, by shutting down their own energy sources and now depending on Russia. All these situations that these are man-made situations, and so and then we can talk about the financial system, and so like at a time when like the bus is like heading for a cliff and we can see that there's a disaster, and we would hope the leaders would maybe hit the brakes or turn the wheel. They're not, and so that's the one thing that I try to keep in mind.
I find a flaw in your logic. May I explain?
Yeah, please. I mean, that's what we're here for.
So the way that I heard you describe that is you told the story and then you listed the evidence for that. And when you have a story of where you think the world is going or what the agenda is for a group of people, you can usually twist facts in order to find that they meet the story. If you loved Trump, you were able to forgive a whole lot of things that conservatives would usually overlook.
Sure. If confirmation bias.
Correct, yes.
Yeah.
And you can change the story. If you hated Trump, you can twist any of his words to sound racist, put it on a headline, list it on CNN.com, and it goes viral. So we can all find a way to match the beliefs that we already have. And I don't have the same story as you, so I interpret information a little bit differently. I don't have the story that the powers that be want to destroy opportunity. But we both lived through 2007 and 2008. Some of us were old enough to live through the crash in the early 2000s. And at that time, there was also a similar story. There's a similar story that this time the powers that be want there to be a crisis. And you had stories about 9/11, you had stories about the Great Recession, and how this benefited a small group of people that had a financial incentive for this to happen. If you believed that overall story, that there was a desire for things to go haywire, then you could find confirmation bias in order to support that theory. You made the mention that you see in the past, we had leaders who wanted things to get better. I mostly agree. And I see that today now. So I just think that your original thesis of things tending to get better applies to today, and that this time is not different. Does that make sense?
So, yeah, but let's put a couple facts here to talk about instead of speculation. So, for example, I've used a chart before. I don't have it handy here, but kind of like an org chart of the world. And so you have at the top the BIS, the Bank of International Settlements, and then you have the IMF, and then you kind of have the policymakers down below, which would include the World Economic Forum. And then down below you have the policy enforcers, which are like the governments. You have the WHO, all those things. And then you have the governments and you have the people, right? So this org chart. And so we know this to be true. So we have like Mark Carney, arguably the most connected person in the world. He worked both at the Bank of England, the Bank of Canada. He's a special envoy to the UN, special advisor to the World Economic Forum. Probably, arguably the most connected person there. Right?
There's some people who think that Klaus Schwab is the most connected and most evil man in the world, which I have fun debating those people. But please go on.
Certainly he is, and we'll talk about that as well. Now, I don't believe in this like kind of a conspiracy theory world where there's like one small group of people that pull all the strings. The way that I look at it is that I look at it like a flock of birds, and you see these birds fly in this formation. It wasn't like, hey Larry, you go over there, and hey John, you go over there. It's like they just kind of birds of a feather flock together, so to speak, right? And so a lot of these people grew up reading the same books, going to the same schools, attending the same things, so they think alike, and they're all moving independently. So I don't think there's just like 5 people in a room that have controlled the world for 100 years. But anyway, back to this point. So like a Mark Carney, super influential. He wrote a book called Values, and I believe in reading, going directly to the source, so there's not speculation, and read exactly what he said. And in that book, he says that, look, the world is not going to be better. The world won't be better. The world will be worse. In the future, you won't be driving. You won't be flying. You won't be eating meat. He said that any company, any businesses that don't go along with ESG mandates will be, quote, economic roadkill. So there will be no funding that will go to that, and we're going to push that agenda. So that's what he said. The world won't be better. It will be worse. The world, you won't be traveling. You won't be driving. You won't be flying. So this is from the guy who's arguably one of the most influential people in the world, wrote it in his book. That's his plan. That's his plan. Now we can go to Klaus Schwab, who's also.
Well, hold on. Let's unpack this a little bit.
Sure.
More. Because when you say that's his plan, what do you mean?
Well, this is what he's written. This is his vision for the world, and
Are
this
these
is how
visions or are these predictions? Because that's a very important distinction.
Well, as an entrepreneur, you would know that we create our future, right? So we set a goal and we work towards becoming a reality. Now, there's nothing guaranteed.
Making a prediction is not the same as
It's not a prediction.
Goal or making
it's a
an
goal.
agenda.
It's a goal, and it starts with actually was in the 70s from the UN, which was what was called Sustainable Development Goals (SDGs), that have now been transformed and. Now Klaus Schwab has kind of changed them to the 17 goals now, which the SDGs are now ESGs, so it's kind of changed a little bit. But these are goals that have been written in stone from the UN for the last 30, 40 years.
Well,
so
your statement was about Mark. Was it Mark?
Right. So back to Mark Carney.
His goals specifically.
Right.
So we have a very strong distinction that I unfortunately can't speak about this person specifically because I'm not familiar with this person, but there is a distinction between having a goal of not driving, of not flying, of not eating meat, and a prediction of that. But I would say that if those are his goals, he's failing miserably because ESG has been a massive failure. You now have funds that are anti-ESG. They will not invest in companies that fall along those standards.
That's our opportunity, and I'm gonna definitely talk about that. I believe as entrepreneurs we can sway the outcome, and that's where I have hope.
Yeah.
But we have to understand.
We can. I mean, capitalism and markets always self-correct. Right. So if you did have ESG that you found to be exploitive, then now there's funds that are going in that direction. In ESG investments have been mostly negative. They've been mostly failures. So,
I agree.
Even if there is an agenda to push that, they're failing miserably.
Yeah. So I agree with those points that it's failing. I believe it will fail because I have hope, and I believe it's capitalism and entrepreneurs that will be the ones to change.
We always win.
So I agree with you. But what I want to highlight is that there is a real force going this direction. I believe, because I'm optimistic, that we will overcome and push back and win. But we still have to understand, in a debate, you have to understand both sides. And so we have to understand there are people who are very powerful and connected who have an agenda to push us in this direction.
Okay, so you mentioned Mark, and who I'm not familiar with, so I can't discuss what he stands for.
But part of the thing is if you don't know who he is, then that's a big blind spot because, like I said, he's arguably one of the most powerful people in the world.
I would be happy to give you this point, but once again, if that is his agenda, he's failing miserably. And second of all, oftentimes our peers will lump predictions in with goals. And now, since I'm not familiar with them, I can't comment on the argument for them being one or the other. But a lot of times when people go in the direction of the World Economic Forum or the UN Agenda 2030, they are talking about things as if they are goals and agendas rather than being a prediction. For example, the most common one, the entire World Economic Forum argument is often founded in this idea of you will own nothing and be happy. And this quote is attributed to Klaus Schwab, but he's never said it. Like if you want to Google it, if you want to find it, it's an interesting rabbit hole because it's not there. And in
It
fact,
came out of a story by Ida, whatever her name was.
yeah,
that
Ida
wrote this,
Auken, member of the
yeah, she
British
wrote this.
Parliament.
I know where that is, but trying to stick on this topic for a minute. So let's say these are goals, or these are plans and goals, and so we can see them taking place. And so these are aligned with the World Economic Forum goals, and so these are listed on their website. These are not conspiratorial, and so we can see they're already in place. So, for example, ICE, internal combustion engine cars, are to be phased out in most parts of the world in the next 5 years, and certainly in the next 8. And so this is a plan that they want to phase out ICE vehicles. Now, part of that plan also includes not really having cars anymore. Instead of all these manufacturers making individual cars, they make fleets of cars, and these fleets of cars are like autonomous self-driving. And so in the story she talked about, she kind of highlighted this, but I have a car that shows up and it takes me where I want to go.
You're talking about the story that Ida Auken wrote?
Yeah, I mean, she talks about it, but you can see all of this in policy, and so this.
You know, it was a fiction piece, right, Mark?
No, I know what it is.
Okay, but you're describing it as if it is an agenda. It was a fiction piece. It was a fiction article.
But there's laws on the books. Every nation has already put out a goal of getting rid of ICE vehicles by certain dates, for example, or getting to net zero, or whatever it is, or getting rid of fossil fuels. So these are dates and these are goals that they have set.
Are you making the correlation that the governments are in step with a fiction piece written by a member of the Danish Parliament?
Push that to the push that that article to the side. I don't even care about that. I'm talking about actual policies that have been put in place, and so goals and targets.
The idea and the objective of getting rid of fossil fuel use.
It's a big one, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But you see this as a net negative for society?
So, so if the goal is for us not to be traveling anymore by car or by plane, and we have actual policies that have been set, like I said, getting rid of automobiles, for example, restricting our ability to travel, which he said that that's the goal in the book, and we already have policies going into place to do that. So, for example, we have now carbon tracking scores that are being put through with MasterCard on credit cards. They're trialing it with banks, with CBDCs, and of course that's written on the books of these goals of these multinational companies like the World Economic Forum. So these are their policies and their goals to get us to this end result of this net zero.
It's world. Whose goals to get us to not drive and not have airplanes?
Klaus Schwab, Mark Carney.
Okay, give me an example of where Klaus Schwab has said that this is their agenda. Because I think you have confirmation bias here, because you started that sentence by saying that is their goal.
It's not confirmation bias. When they have an agenda to get to net zero by a certain date, then you have to go, well, how do they think that we'll get there? So any goal without a plan is just a dream. So a goal must have a plan. So then they have a plan and they spell it out, right? They spell it out. So having to restrict movement, cut down on carbon on airplanes and cars is part of those steps that get us to that end goal. Now, we can talk about if we ever achieve there. So like Vanguard has abandoned their net zero goal, right? So like I believe it will fail, but that doesn't change the fact that these are written stated goals that they're working towards.
Okay. I feel like a mosquito at a nudist colony. There's so many things to look at and discover and to go in, and I don't know quite where to start. So let's start here. If the goal is to be carbon net zero by a certain date, we both agree that the marketplace will get there faster than governments ever can. You don't need to have a removal of travel and a removal of vehicles in order to achieve that. The marketplace is already doing that at unprecedented speed.
No.
Yes, it is.
Well, no, so I'm 100% for free markets. So I agree with you. However, their goals are unrealistic and unattainable. And the only way to achieve those goals is not through technology. We don't have the technology for that. The only way to achieve those goals is to actually stop doing what
I don't
we're
agree.
doing.
I simply don't agree. And I don't think
we don't have technology to achieve net zero in 7 years.
We're very quickly getting there. We are very quickly advancing that technology. I mean,
like what? What technology?
As we sit here, nuclear fusion became a positive energy change.
Did you read into that though? Yes, that was a big PR piece.
The technology is still far off, but it was a monumental breakthrough.
We're many decades away from that.
I don't know that it's many decades. I mean, if you look at the speed of change, even with electric vehicles, we would never have predicted that we were here by now. We never would have. Yes, it's
But
sometime up, but
electric
it's a
vehicles
major breakthrough.
electric vehicles are basically a PR stunt as well. They make up a small percentage, and they're not scalable. We can't produce batteries. We don't have the battery technology to do that.
And
So
that's why a big part of Elon's vision is solar.
and solar is also not going to work. Very, very, very
Yeah,
simply. Well,
I just I
this
don't agree.
this is not really debatable. So, in order to have wind or solar, you have to have wind and sun. And so, what you can easily do, and I have a chart. Let me see if I can pull it up while I'm talking to you. Actually, I don't know if I can share my screen. And so, what you do is you go, well, most of the world isn't sunny enough to run solar, and most of the world doesn't have enough wind to power wind and solar. So what you do is you can map out the world. I have a map. I'll pull it up here.
Well, Mark, here's the flaw I see in your logic. We started this conversation by talking about what happens when millions of entrepreneurs have their backs against the wall. And we agree that capitalism is the fastest way to create change, the fastest way to create wealth. We agree that the free market is the way that you create innovation in order to solve the world's problems. The only place where we disagree is whether or not there are malevolent leaders who are trying to destroy what capitalists have built. And where I fall on this is that the entrepreneurs who are solving these problems are doing them at faster and faster rates, and that the rate of change is going to increase in our favor in order to be able to solve these problems. And I think that most leaders know that, and that they can see the trend of energy becoming free as the result of technological innovation, that they can see exactly how we're going to get there, and we don't need government force in order to achieve those aims.
So a couple
Show
of
me
things
this map that you got.
Couple of things with wind and solar. So what you have to do is you have to kind of map out where wind and solar would even be practical. So, for example, you see the United States up there. The blue in the middle is where there's enough wind to run windmills. The green is where you have enough.
Who produced this?
This is by Peter Zion. You can see on the bottom right, Zion Geopolitics.
Okay.
And he's got all his sources listed there on the bottom left: NREL, DOE, IRENA, EPA, et cetera. And so where does wind and solar make sense? Well, where you have enough wind and solar. So you can see there, America is blessed, right? America is the most God-blessed piece of land in the world. And so we have plenty of wind in the middle. We have plenty of sun in the southwest. That's great. But as you can see, the rest of the world isn't so lucky. Australia looks really well. The south of South America looks okay. But most of South America is not good. And then what you have to do is you have to take where does wind and solar work, and then within 1,000 miles of a major city, because you can't move energy across the world. So within 1,000 miles. So this kind of shows you where wind and solar would work in the world. The other problem with wind and solar, obviously, is it's not windy, and it's not sunny all the time. And so what we've seen just in the last couple of months in Europe is they had a very low wind year. Like, who would have thought you had a low wind year? And so now all the wind that they've built isn't producing enough energy, and then you can't store it. So in order to store enough energy, so for the United States, so
with today's technology, and
so this goes back to, so you have the website capitalism.com.
Yes,
so you're obviously a capitalist.
Yes,
as
sir.
am I. And I
Yes,
believe that humans have an infinite return because there's no limit to our imagination.
Amen.
And because there's no limit to our imagination, there's no limit to what we can achieve. I believe that.
Amen.
But there are limitations within time frames. So I believe I could go make $1 billion. I probably can't make $1 billion by tomorrow. Right?
It's happened, but sure.
Right. So there's limitations, right? So part of goal setting is learning how to set realistic goals. And so I could probably become a billionaire, but probably not by tomorrow, probably not by the end of the week or the end of this year, right? It might take me 5 or 10, whatever, right? And so when you hear Biden go on and say, oh, we're just magically going to have net zero in 3 years from now, well, we could probably get there. There's lots of things we could do right now today that would help us get there, like switching to nuclear, for example.
Sure.
But to build out nuclear is going to take a decade, right? So we can't get there by then. And so when you have, and the problem that we have, and of course you're a capitalist, one of the biggest threats, and I don't know if you can debate this one, but obviously Klaus Schwab, as well as a lot of leaders, and we're seeing it in the United States, but Klaus Schwab is pushing something called stakeholder capitalism, or what he calls a public-private partnership, which of course is the opposite of capitalism. And so the problem is when you have the opposite of capitalism, when you have centrally commanded economies that try to dictate everything from top down, they don't have the information from a market economy, they don't have the information from entrepreneurs, and so they just we're going to have unicorns in our backyard that poop Skittles. It's like, no, we're not. That's not realistic.
I view this the same way that I view the term conscious capitalism, which was coined by my friend John Mackey. John Mackey is the founder of Whole Foods. He lives here in Austin, Texas. He's an acquaintance of mine. I've been to his house. He's spoken at our events. And I have the same view of his philosophy on conscious capitalism. My view is that capitalism is naturally conscious, that capitalism is better for both parties and all parties that are involved. And so we don't need to call it conscious capitalism. I see that as repeating the same thing.
I don't even know what that means, but okay.
Like, conscious capitalism is basically the same as stakeholder capitalism, where you look at casting a vision or building a business in a way that benefits all parties. And you start the business from that view. And that's great. That's wonderful. Except capitalism is already naturally leaning in that direction. I view stakeholder capitalism the exact same way. It's better for all parties that are involved. But you're talking about the partnership between public and private.
But what Klaus Schwab is who are the stakeholders? And the stakeholders are the 200 or so companies that they've listed. And so really it's Marxism or communism just rebranded is what they're trying to push. And so that's Marxism or communism is not compatible with capitalism. It's the opposite, right? And so we have
that's true, but that is a big jump in logic. I mean, you just went from my interpretation of what Klaus Schwab is doing is Marxism with a different name, and Marxism and capitalism are antithetical. Therefore, Klaus Schwab is antithetical to capitalism. Those were really big leaps in beliefs, and I just don't have the same understanding of it. I think Klaus Schwab is very benign and mostly a nothing burger, and that is as undangerous as a human as they could be. And the reason that matters to me is because I see so many of our peers putting their energy into trying to defeat this organization where they could just put their energy into building really, really great stuff and not have to worry about these big nothing burgers in the media. So I just don't interpret it the same way that you do. And I think you're making leaps in logic that are leading to confirmation bias. That's my take.
Okay. I go back and say, go read their stuff and
I have.
And take.
I read them all the time.
Have you read his book? Have you read Klaus Schwab's books?
Yeah. Yes, I have.
So you read The Great Reset. You read The Fourth Industrial Revolution.
And there are plenty of things that I disagree with. There are plenty of things that I think his analysis is incorrect on. And I certainly don't want him to be making policy decisions in the United States. Certainly don't want that. And if any government were to adopt some of those things, then I would push against them. I'm glad that the Build Back Better plan failed. I'm glad that ESG has funds that are against it. That's the role of the marketplace. I just don't see it as dangerous because he has no power. He even has very little influence. So there's plenty of things that I disagree with. But when he bragged on that he's implemented over 200 governments with his young leaders, that's not real. That's all fake. You could say the same thing about Harvard. I mean, it's important. Like, if you want, you can go in and you can look at what they're teaching in the Young Global Leaders Association.
You can say the same about Harvard, and that goes back to what I said, like the birds of a feather flock together. So you have these people that have all been kind of trained together, and then they go out into the world, and so they're not all being held together by one puppet guy, but they are all taught the same things. Like most of our government, like Hillary Clinton, Obama came from Columbia, and you go back and look at what does Columbia teach? Well, it doesn't teach anything good, and then no wonder Obama and Hillary have these worldviews because that's where they learned, right?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And you can say the same thing about Austrian economists. Right? I come from a very Austrian view of economics. You could say, well, all these people come from this line of thought, therefore they believe these things. You can do the same thing with the Young Global Leaders organization. But
the difference is Austrian economics believes in human action and believes in freedom and savings and
well, of course, that's our bias. Like everybody's thought process, they believe that they're the right one. Otherwise, you wouldn't have them.
I would disagree on that. And I was actually asked this question by somebody, and somebody said, how do you know you're on the right side? And that's kind of the question that you're posing, right? How do you know you're on the right side? And I would say I believe I'm on the right side because I'm not trying to tell anybody else what to do, nor am I trying to artificially create money out of thin air and steal through inflation. So I'm not doing any of that. I believe the side that's trying to tell you what to inject into your body or what you can and can't eat or what you can and can't do for business and is trying to steal from your wealth, I believe they're in the wrong. So I believe in freedom, and so I believe freedom is always the right side.
So you and I agree that freedom is the most important value to defend. We absolutely believe that. And we also agree that any entity or large organization that is a threat to freedom needs to be distrusted and needs to be eradicated, maybe too strong of a word, but at least we need to be skeptical of anything that encroaches upon anyone's freedom. We both agree there. I just don't fear organizations that push up against that, because freedom and capitalism always win. Always. You can temporarily hold back freedom, but it never goes away, because all that does is increase the demand for individual freedom. We have a very liberating trend, because freedom cannot be put back in the bag. It can't be put back in.
It's sure been put in the bag for a long time in North Korea.
Well, they've never had it. If you open,
they've never had it before the communists took over North Korea. They didn't have it.
You have it in South Korea, and you have a demand for freedom bubbling up there, and eventually that will break through. You can try to restrict it in small places. You can try and push it back temporarily, but long term, it's like building up a dam. Water always crashes forward.
So I obviously agree. The only difference is that I recognize a threat, and so I need to actively push back on that. So, for example, one of the big threats, I framed this up in a conversation for everybody listening. You can go see the whole conversation with Peter McCormick on a podcast called What Bitcoin Did, and the title is The Battle for the Fate of Humanity, which is a pretty big title. And part of that, is that if you go back through thousands of years of history, it's a repeating story of freedom, oppression, and then a revolution happens, and then freedom, and then oppression, and then revolution, and it just repeats, right? On and on and on, right? And so because their model being central planning, communism, whatever you want to call it, doesn't work, it's always going to fail over a long enough period of time, right?
Sure,
and so,
absolutely.
So we certainly agree there. But what allows these revolutions to happen is somebody has that taste for freedom, and they push for it, and to your point with North Korea, it starts bubbling up, and eventually there's the revolution that happens. The problem is, if we could get to a world where that wouldn't be allowed to happen again. Now, how could that happen? So if you understand...
I don't see that as possible.
Yeah, so let me just kind of frame this out. So kind of like the movie The Matrix. But basically, if you take a look at like China, for example, which, by the way, China is being tested right now. There's a lot of pushback. What's going on? And they just had to come off their zero. They just had to come off their zero COVID policy, which was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
But if we could imagine a world, and we know since 2016, Facebook admitted that they use AI to manage your news feed. So if they could, which we know they have been for quite some time, if they can use social media as a way to show you what they want, they did tests that show you they can affect your mood, they can make you happy or angry, right? And so if they can show you, like in China, where they have the Great Firewall, and they only show you the information they want you to see. And through technology, they're able to censor all other views and so forth, and shut down all dissent. Okay, well, that's part of it. The bigger piece, of course, is the social credit score system that China has, which, in 2018, they blocked 32 million people from buying bus tickets because they said bad things about the government online. And so they can restrict movement. And then the last piece that we haven't seen yet, but which is coming in, is the central bank digital currencies. And the thing with central bank digital currencies is, one, it gives them all the data, which is what they need, but more importantly, it's programmable money, right? So now, not do we just block the bus transaction, but now you can't even buy it, or now you've exceeded your carbon score, so you can't fill up your car with gas. But when you take all of these new technologies that we're moving into, and we're not quite there yet, but we will, with CBDCs, which are already rolled out in China, and social credit score systems, and surveillance online, they could potentially prevent that dissenting voice ever from popping up again.
I mean, you had to piece together a lot of different pieces.
But these are all pieces that are coming together.
Technology, and you had to create one timeline of them all coming together to.
But they're all
freedom.
here. They have a social credit score system. We have CBDCs. They're already in China right now.
What I'm saying is you have to assume a lot of things will happen, and then for it to be misused.
Well, you just project the natural trajectory that we're on.
Well,
so like this is within this is
where
these pieces
there's
are
a massive unplug from Facebook, where Facebook stock is down 80%, where people are turning it off. I mean, the millennial and old people. Social network.
Don't get hung up on Facebook. Don't get hung up on Facebook. I'm talking about the technology with social credit score and CBDCs, and so that's here. And so they could potentially.
Well, you jumped to that last. And at least in the U.S., the central bank digital currency has been abandoned because of FedNow. because they were able to accomplish the base level of what they wanted to do. Without it, they've abandoned that project. And you have many different blockchain projects that could be used privately as a way to go against that. So you can tell the same story in, like, you went with one way that the story could go when there's an infinite number of different ways that the story
but I
could
believe it's important to understand that that is the way that it could go, and that is a threat, and so we should be doing everything we can to make sure that doesn't become a reality.
But that's essentially like saying, let's make up a story where it ends up with leprechauns running the world, so we should be aware of that and try to defend against that. It's one story of an infinite number of way of stories. I think it's a much more empowering use of our attention to say, this opens up so many opportunities for us to create. This opens up for so much opportunity and resources for us to make $1 billion by tomorrow, which is Mark Moss's goal.
It does, and I want to talk about this massive opportunity, because bigger problems create bigger opportunities.
Totally. And
I see a massive opportunity both to prevent that from happening and for entrepreneurs to make a lot of money. So we're going to move to that next.
Great.
So we definitely agree on a lot more than we disagree on.
Oh yeah.
And our worldview and our outcome.
Everybody who's watching, Mark and I are just having fun now. Right? Like it is very rare to get two capitalists who vehemently disagree on something and walk away respecting one another and don't walk away calling each other socialists and saying that they're part of the agenda and part of the conspiracy. Because Mark and I both agree that capitalists and entrepreneurs are the ones who are creating freedom. And the most important thing that you can do is to be free yourself. And then we can pontificate on all the different ways that the world could go, all the opportunities that could go. So I just wanted to add it in there because it's so rare for these types of conversations, right? For two people that agree on so much to focus on the little pieces where we disagree and have a good time doing so.
Yeah. Well, and we have to understand that piece, because the way that I see problem, and this is why individualism is so important, is because we see the world differently. And so I see different problems than you do, so I go create different solutions than you do.
Yes.
And so that's why capitalism and individualism will have to go hand in hand. When you have a situation like China where everybody thinks the same, they're basically robots, you have no innovation. Right? And so you and I see the problems a little bit differently, and so we're going to go create solutions differently. But I would say back to this point that we were on just a second ago, you jumped to this world where maybe we have leprechauns, and that's kind of funny, haha. But like, we literally have social credit score systems and CBDCs going into place right now. We have health passports and gateways. So just, 3 or 4 weeks ago, the G20, the top 20 countries in the world, met and agreed to push through a health passport system to control movement around the world. This is not speculation of leprechauns. This is, they literally had a meeting a couple weeks ago and they want to do this. Now, can it be stopped? Will it happen? Of course, that's the speculation part. But it doesn't mean that the top 20 countries didn't get together and just do that. So we're not just speculating this could happen. These are technologies we have in place right now, and governments and leaders have said we want to install these to happen. So it's a real threat. Will it happen? Not if I can do anything about it.
Right. Like when there are pushes against freedom, it's our responsibility to push against them. Absolutely. I just don't have the same global story as you, that there's a unified effort to take away our freedom and our ability to rise up against it.
The G20, that's a pretty unified effort.
But no, what I'm saying is a unified effort to restrict freedom and to prevent any revolution from ever fighting for freedom. I don't have that.
The G20 just agreed to install a piece of technology to control everybody's movement.
Once again, you are looking at a global narrative that you have and then finding evidence for it. Like, we could sit here and debate.
No, they
whether
had
that is
the
a good
meeting.
thing
They
or
came
a
out of
bad
the meeting and said,
thing,
we're going to install this.
That is an entire agenda to restrict freedom and prevent revolutions from happening.
I would just say if you don't look at all the signs together, then you don't get the context that it's
no. That's confirmation. That is confirmation bias 101.
It's not.
You're starting with a story and then breaking into pieces of evidence. Like that is not inductive reasoning. That is you are confirmed by, you have a suspicion, it then gets confirmed, and now we're looking at all these other pieces. And I think the argument falls apart when you remove the story from it.
Yeah.
So I just want to summarize here. I want to summarize here because I know we want and need to move on. And it's that overall, you have a different overarching story than I do. And I don't know if I'm right. Because you can have
no, you're not. You're wrong, but
you have all of the reasons why I like evidence to support your claim. I have mine. And at the end of the day, I don't know if I am right or wrong. I know how I will know if I am wrong. I know that if I start seeing X, Y, and Z, I will have to rethink my worldview. I know that if I start seeing my travel restricted and then I can't own a car, I will say maybe Mark was right on this podcast.
Yeah, but it's going to be too late by that point.
I don't agree with that.
We're trying to predict the future. We're trying to predict the future, right? That's what entrepreneurs have to do.
I think that there's always a chance that freedom always wins. So I would need to adjust my strategy, because my strategy right now is to empower entrepreneurs to create financial freedom. I would need to adjust my strategy if I see that we can't travel and there's no movement allowed anymore. So I know how I know if I am wrong. What I would encourage people to do as they're weighing your list of reasons and my list of reasons is to answer the question, how will I know if my worldview is wrong? How will I know? Because we all have an overarching story. You've got one, I've got one. How often do we question that overarching story? Because I don't think that we're ever free if we're being run by our subconscious stories. So just like I have a family member who believes that there's going to be a rapture and Jesus is going to rescue all of the Christians and they're going to disappear and then we're going to have a 7-year tribulation. She has that overarching story and she looks at every political discussion through that lens. I don't have that story. I think that's crazy wackadoodle. So I don't have, but I will know that if all the Christians disappear one day, I was wrong and I need to rethink my thesis. So I think it's important that we ask the question of how will we know if our worldview is wrong? And I think only then can we start to test if we are right or wrong.
So great summary. Let me give a summary as well. So what I would say is I agree. Confirmation bias is a serious problem that most people suffer. Everybody suffers from. We're all susceptible to it. And so what we all need to do, and I preach this all the time, is that what we should always be doing is looking for information that goes against our bias.
Yes.
We're always trying to find the holes. And so I made a video recently and I said why I don't think there's going to be another market crash and why I think that the market's going to keep going up. And I said, are you 100% certain, 100% certain that the market's going to crash? 100%. Of course you're not. Are you 90%? So maybe there's 10%. Let's explore that, right? And oh man, I got people so pissed off. I had all these people telling me
that's beautiful.
They're unsubscribing from my channel. How dare I, right? So I do believe in always looking for information that goes against my confirmation bias.
Good for you,
think
Mark.
The difference between my view and your view, as I'm understanding right now and through your summary in our conversation, is that what you're saying is until I see those things happening, I don't have that worldview, which is understandable. The problem with that view is that by the time you do see it, it's too late. And so what I do is I try to use a whole bunch of reasoning. One, obviously looking for stuff that goes against it, and I'll come back to that. But what I try to do is I try to use history, so we understand natural chain of events, cause and effect, right? And so we understand the way history works. But we also, like I said, I like to go directly to the source rather than opinions and speculations. Directly to the source. What did this person who's trying to push these balls, what did they say? What are their goals? When the G20 has a meeting and comes out of the meeting and said, our new objective is to pass this and put it into place, I take that seriously. Now, will it happen? I hope not. If I can do anything about it, I won't. But this is their objective. This is not speculation. Now, it is speculation if they'll ever achieve that goal, but they've told that. Now, to the confirmation bias piece, I would then go look for information that go against that bias. So I would go, is there any information that would show that that's not going to happen? Are there any lawmakers? Are there any NGOs that are saying that's wrong and we're not going to do it? And the answer is no. So there is no other information that goes against this. So it is speculation. We don't know the future. None of us do, which is why there's no such thing as certainties. But when the G20 says they're going to do this and they've all adopted this and voted on it and agreed to it, then I have to go, well, that's probably the direction we're going unless something were to derail that.
I mean, we could go down a really long rabbit hole here because I still think the way you're viewing that is confirmation bias. But
so you gave your summary. But then I need to find other information that goes against the bias, and I can't. Okay, you gave your summary. I gave mine. Let's talk about the opportunity. Let's talk about the opportunity. Let's talk about the opportunity. Because I do talk a lot about bad things that are potentially going to happen, but at the same time, I'm full of hope. And hope for the future. I do want to make just one comment before we jump into that, because something that you've said over and over, and I've said over and over, which is I believe freedom always wins. Always. I do. I believe that. However, something I've been struggling with a lot, and that is that not everybody wants freedom. And as a matter of fact, most people don't. And I believe that as a human, we have this natural drive and desire, which is why capitalism is there, right? Capitalism is about becoming more efficient with my scarce resources, right? Instead of carrying one rock at a time, I made a wheelbarrow to carry 10 rocks, right? And so we're always trying to that, and then free and voluntary trade. I killed an animal, you have a fire. Hey, let's share the fire and the food, right? That's capitalism, but not everybody has that. And so what we can see, this was really highlighted. I don't know if you saw Dr. Matthias Desmond. He kind of came up with that whole theory on, I'm drawing a blank, on the mass formation psychosis. And he was talking about how like 30% of the people are just going to go along with whatever narrative is. 30% of the people are going to reject whatever the narrative is. And then there's like the 40% in the middle that could sway either way. And so when it comes to freedom, most people, dude, they just want to live their life, man. Let me just live my life. Let me just be with my kids. I don't want to get involved in that, right, kind of a thing. And so you talked about the rapture, and I don't necessarily believe that, but I do believe in the Bible. And in the Bible, whether you believe it or not, there's history in there. And one of the stories, and it just kind of highlights this, is that Moses went and freed the Israelites from Egypt, and they went to the desert, right? And when they got there, after 400 years of slavery, where they were being beaten and killed and whatever, they get over there, and then because they didn't know what was coming next, they said, at least just let us go back to Egypt where we were slaves, because at least we knew where our food was coming from. And I think that just sets the mindset of a lot of people where they would rather trade security for freedom. Freedom is messy, it's dangerous, it's scary. And so I think it's up to us, the capitalists, to really push this, because the majority of people don't all want that.
I think we actually all want it. It's a matter of who's willing to fight for it.
Right.
We all desire freedom, right? But you're right that we will prioritize safety before we prioritize freedom.
Some will.
You and I
Many
have
will.
Our lizard brain comes first. You and I just have the belief that freedom is the best way to provide those things. And we happen to believe that the food system that has been created by capitalism is way better than what any dictator could ever create. Like, no dictator is ever going to let me walk to Whole Foods. They're just not going to create that system, whereas capitalism will. And so we just happen, I think, to think a little bit longer term. And that longer term is about the society that we're building and the systems through which we accomplish those goals. And capitalism happens to be the best way to do that.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't know if you know, but I recently wrote a book. It's got a couple bestseller categories. It's called The Uncommunist Manifesto.
Yeah, I'm familiar.
And my co-author, Alex Fetsky, I had kind of abandoned the word capitalist because it just has this negative connotation and people misunderstand it. And I've been using like free markets, but he's like, no, we need to reclaim that word. Right. We need to stand up. We need to defend that word. And so in that book, we have like a whole glossary of terms, and we really make the case for capitalism in that book. But anyway, let's jump to the hope and the optimism, but more importantly, the opportunity that I see. And I'm going to be pivoting into this opportunity for next year. And I know you're doing a lot of the same things. So let's talk about that. So big problems, problems equal opportunities, and big problems equal bigger opportunities. And as I said, I'm very bullish on what happens when millions of entrepreneurs are backs against the wall. Yeah. I believe that our greatest, and I don't know if I believe I believe it's factual, but the greatest vote we have is with our money. Yes. We saw with the midterms, like in whatever elections, like our vote doesn't really matter, but our vote with our money does. So you've mentioned, ESG failing and now anti-ESG funds being set up. Yeah. People are voting with their money, right? We saw 6 states now have divested their funds from BlackRock, and BlackRock's like, oh shoot, and now Vanguard said, okay, we're abandoning that, right? Mm-hmm. And so the vote with the money is really making an impact.
Yeah.
We agree on that, right?
Totally.
Okay, so
we might have different opinions about BlackRock, but yes, as voting with your dollar is the most important. I love that you said the way we vote politically doesn't matter, but how we vote with our money matters very much.
Sure, that's the ultimate vote, right? That's the ultimate vote is with our money, and so, without opinion on BlackRock, 6 states did divest their money from BlackRock. Mm-hmm. And we have 19 states that have now filed lawsuits against a handful of banks because of ESG policies. And so I'm very bullish on that, and that's the proof that we need to keep going, right? But here's this opportunity that I'm seeing, and maybe this is too far on my side to look at this. But let me just frame this up for you. So we know that our vote is our vote with our money is our biggest opportunity, and our vote at the ballots don't really say much. I think regardless of what political aisle you're on, really, I think it's all summarized in the race in Pennsylvania, where you had a celebrity doctor who's good looking and very articulate, and I thought was a liberal. He used to be backed by Oprah's best friend, Dr. Oz. Everybody loves him, super smart. He's a doctor. And you have a guy who can't even put a sentence together. And I get it. He had a stroke and whatever, and I don't want to pick fun on that. But if you had a stroke or you're sick or whatever and you can't talk, like, you can't be a representative. And they voted him in over a very well-spoken, well-liked celebrity doctor. And I think that just frames it all up. Either they are so ideologically blind or what, it was corrupt or whatever. But anyway, so the vote with our money. So here's what I'm seeing. So as an opportunity, and you help people do this, so I want your opinion on it. So you remember, in the last election, Biden and Trump, Obama had broken every voting record in the world. He had, in the United States, he had the most votes. Trump came and beat that. He got even more votes than Obama did. And then Trump beat it again. He got even more votes. Yeah. And then somehow Biden also beat it. So however you look at it, it was at least...
To be fair, Hillary got more votes than Donnie did too. So they both broke the record.
Okay, so if you want to look at it, it's at least like a very close 50-50 of the country. Sure. Some people might think that there's a silent majority because of the way that the polling works. If you look at a map of the United States, it's mostly red with a couple blue areas. Sure. Yeah. So I would say at least half of the country is this kind of conservative base, maybe 75%, who are probably not happy with the direction things are going, and they call themselves a silent majority, right? I get about 5,000 comments a week across my social media platforms, and I constantly get emails from people like, what do we do? What do we do? I don't know what to do, right? All these things. And part of the problem is, and then you saw that speech, Biden gave that speech with the red background with the two military people there, and he's like, the biggest threat that we have in America is conservatives. MAGA conservatives are the problem, and we need to do this, right? And he basically demonized at least half the country, if not more, right? And so all of these people have been demonized. All of these people are the problem. And all of these people aren't happy with the way it's going, but they don't know what to do. So that's frame up one. But then here's where I see this opportunity. So I believe that not only do humans have a drive for freedom, they also have a drive they want truth. We have to live in truth. And so when you see like the Soviet Union, they got so big, and under these communist dictator regimes, people they're forced to live a lie, and they don't want to live a lie. And when somebody breaks through and lives in the truth, the people see that and they want that truth. And I believe that truth has been sucked out of our ecosystem. And so now boys can be girls, and you can be whatever you want, and like all these things. And so it's created a lot of problems. And we can see that this truth has been sucked out, and it's created this vacuum. And so look at the rise of Jordan Peterson. Like, he came out and said, shut up, wipe your face off, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, play the hand that you're dealt. And like, he just, boom, like people wanted that. They needed to hear that. You can see it with Andrew Tate, similar message, kind of same thing. Maloney over in Italy kind of said the same thing. These people that are willing to stand up and speak the truth are really growing because there's this vacuum that's been created, right? And so I look at these...
It's important to comment here because you keep saying the truth. We had an interesting Twitter exchange this past week about reality being subjective or objective. Yeah. And I think what you are commenting on is people speaking according to their values. Like having values that go against the narrative and being willing to speak against them. Because the truth may or may not be knowable by human beings. But doubling down on your values and speaking from that we'll call that truth, that is very rare in society because most people are just willing to go along with whatever the macro narrative is. What you're commenting on, I think, is more a reflection of people being bold enough to say what other people are not willing to say that is alignment with many people's values. I just wanted to slip that in there because I think you and I would say the same things values-wise, but use different words to describe it. So I just wanted to add some context there.
Yeah, I don't believe in the subjective reality. I'm more of an objectivist in that terms. And so,
how do you know? How do you know what is objectively true?
Well, I think, for example, back to this kind of Jordan Peterson example, is it true that you're going to be more successful in life, meaning have better happiness and achieve better results and take care of your friends and family, if you sit in a corner and wallow about your self-pity, or if you take responsibility and take action in your life?
It depends on the person's life situation. And for me, I definitely will be fighting for my own freedom and my own prosperity. There are plenty of people in very affluent families who get lots of money from mom and dad for sitting in the corner and wallowing about their life.
Well, I mean, if you're saying who gets the most money, but I'm talking about, being able to take control of their life, be responsible, feel happy, feel fulfilled, and actually create progress. You can only do those things if you take responsibility and take action.
Sure,
Sitting in a corner, you'll never do that. So that's
I think you are talking about a value. Again, this is a value that you and I share.
Okay, that's a whole rabbit hole we probably don't need to go down because we agree.
That's fair. That's fair, yeah. Mark.
So people live in their values, people willing to go against the narrative, whatever, right? So the narrative has been so stacked one way that now people who will stand up with a different narrative, we can call it that. But I think, again, I think there's this massive opportunity where we have all these people globally, right, in Italy, in Europe, even in Canada, you have Pierre Poliv, but Jordan Peterson, you have Joe Rogan, you got Andrew Tate, all these different examples. And so you have 5,000 comments a week coming across social media. What do I do? All these people need to vote with their money, but how? How do they vote with their money when every company has gone woke? And so I look at it, this is my strategy, so I'll break it down. I'm calling it a 3-part strategy. It's a top-down, bottom-up, inside-out. And so I borrowed it from Marxism, right? I stole it from Marxism. So Marxism came into the United States through a 3-part strategy, top-down, bottom-up, inside-out. And I think we can fight back doing the same thing. And so top down is like politics, which we've already kind of agreed that there's not a lot of leverage there, but local politics is still important. My sheriff's important, my governor's important, and the further away it gets, less important. But hey, if I'm breathing, I'm swinging, I might as well be voting, right? Then there's the bottom up, and that's like the education piece. And so we can share education, we can wake people up, things like that. But then most importantly, it's the inside out, and this is where they really won, which is the money. That's the businesses. And so we have all these businesses that are pushing these woke ideologies. The Disneys, go woke, go broke, Netflix pushing their movies, or you got T-Mobile or whatever. We can sit here and go all day. You get the point. But where do people spend their money if they don't align with that? And we're seeing businesses pop up. And the best example I have is Ben Shapiro. So with Daily Wire. I was
going to go exactly there.
Right. And I mean, just look at this, right? So Ben Shapiro started Daily Wire. Now they're doing a couple things. One, they're creating movies that are anti-woke movies, so people now have another option to spend their money. The best example, which you were probably thinking of, is Harry's Razors.
Yes.
I mean, it is just like
Jeremy's Razors.
Harry's Razors. Harry's Razor was their sponsor, and they were a woke company. And Ben Shapiro says these really mean things. He's like this angry guy, and he said that men can't get pregnant. And Harry's Razors was all mad, and they said, "You retract that, or we're going to pull our sponsorship." And he said, "You know what? Actually, take your sponsorship. I'm going to start Jeremy's Razors." And the whole website is we're just an anti-woke company, basically, and they're crushing it.
Yep. They're crushing it.
And we have MyPillow, we got, Black Rifle Coffee, we can look at different examples. We got, now there's like My Patriot Mobile. You talked about this anti-ESG fund, which is Strive Asset Management. And so we're starting to see that, right? And I'm curious your perspective. One, do you see that as a big problem and a big opportunity? There's this vacuum. And then two, do you see that? And then two, looking at Harry's and Jeremy's razors, and I know you're like this big Amazon guy, branding products and building them out through channels.
But Jeremy is a friend of mine. I'm going to visit him in a few weeks down in Nashville. So, I mean, I completely align with where they're going.
But it seems like this opportunity is so big that like I could almost just take any product off Amazon, top seller, and just rebrand it and probably fill a pretty big void.
Boom. So this is where you're hitting on something.
Boom.
You're hitting on something really beautiful here. So I wrote a book. It's called 12 Months to 1 Million. It's basically the playbook for building $1 million business in about 12 months, broken down into the step-by-step formula. But the first step in there is choose your who. Decide who your customer is going to be, not what product you're going to sell, not what your mission statement is, but who it's for. What Jeremy Boring at Jeremy's Razors did so beautifully is they already have a very clear who. It's based on values. It's based on the underserved. It's those who don't feel like they have a voice or a place to put their dollars right now. And they said, all right, great, we'll start with razors. We'll go here and we will serve the people who match our values. What's beautiful about that is we can do this with anything. We can do this with coffee. Black Rifle Coffee did exactly the same thing. We could do this with toys. We could do this with pillows. Like we can do it with any commodity because for the first time in history, we care about the values behind our decisions and where our dollar is going as much as we care about the product itself, if not more. I had dinner 2 days ago with somebody who has basically controls an audience of several million people, and they have a very Christian audience, like born again, conservative Christian audience. And we were basically brainstorming what a food brand would look like, because a lot of times our dollars go to Kraft Heinz, or they go to Starbucks, they go to snack companies that we don't agree with. But if you had a food brand that had a very clear mission for a clear person, you get that audience. And so my answer to your question, like, what do we do about this? I say start businesses. Start businesses for the people that you want to serve. You likely want to serve people just like you. Great. That makes for a very fun, vision-filled, exciting, profitable company. Because all we need to do is pick the person that we serve and then carve out, the 3 to 5 products that person buys or wants to buy, and sell them consistently, because 4 products that sell 25 sales a day at a $30 price point is $1 million business. We just need to fill in those variables. And it starts with choosing who. And the beauty of what you're talking about is we can choose just about any product. Jeremy just posted how he wants to start a whiskey company now because the whiskey companies are going woke. And it's just a great example of that values sell product. And so if you believe in these things, you can start a business for exactly those types of people. People will push against you and people will choose to love you. And that, I think, is the opportunity now. You have woke businesses, you'll have anti-woke businesses. And people will be able to vote with their dollars because we have different options that align with our values. I think that is the opportunity for about the next 10 years to build a multi-million-dollar business, even if you don't have a good idea, even if you don't have experience, even if you don't have a marketing budget, even if you don't have VC capital. Like, I think that is the opportunity for the next decade.
Yeah.
Maybe we could call that Capitalism Agenda 2030, Mark. we can just call that. That's the agenda. That's the opportunity to make as many people as rich as possible before 2030.
And what I love about it, Ryan, is that not only is it a massive opportunity. So, I was doing an interview with my buddy George Gammon the other day, and he has a very similar channel to my channel, and I was asking him why all these videos are like fear porn, and
pessimism porn, yeah,
whatever, right? And it's like the world's gonna blow up. Here's what you gotta do, right? And it's like these fear porn videos work out good, and somebody messaged me, DM me on Twitter, I think. And they said, that question has been just repeated in my mind over and over, and I've just been thinking about it. Why do I like fear porn, blah, blah, blah. And he wrote me this long answer. And basically summarized it, and he said, look, I'm a millennial. The economy's been ruined by these baby boomers. Real estate's too expensive. Stocks are too overvalued. I don't have a chance. I have nowhere to get in. I'm broke. And I guess I'm just rooting for the world to crash so I have an opportunity to get back in.
That's very interesting.
It was like this really long message. And I was like, you know what? I appreciate that long message. I'm going to write him a long message back. And I wrote him a long message. I said, look, I get it. I understand your viewpoint, but look, man, there's plenty of opportunity. You can make $1 million. Cause he said, if I found somebody that was behind this, I'd put all my might and being into it. And so I said, hey, you said you would put all your might and being into it. Would you put all your might and being into creating $1 million business in the next 12 months? Because you totally could. Here's how. And I said step by step, like 5 steps. So what I love about it is like, this is a potential opportunity for all these people who feel disenfranchised. There's massive opportunity here. But what I like even better is this group specifically, these values, and maybe these are more my people than your people, but these people that see these problems coming, like, hey, this health passport movement system could be coming. Hey, this ESG to restrict movement could be coming. And I could start a business to counter that. And I can allow people to then vote with their money to choose and show the people which one they want. And so not only is it an opportunity for me to go make money, but for me, and maybe we only get here once we've made enough money, but making enough money isn't my objective anymore, right? It's like, can I make money and affect change the way I want to affect change? Right. And so I think that gives people that opportunity where they can, one, make money, but also affect real change according to their worldview. If you don't want to see the world going woke, then do something about it.
That's
and
right.
It's the opportunity and the solution at the same time.
Yes, and the interesting thing there is that if you stand for something, you will end up making much more money than if you just have a lifeless, purposeless, visionless business. So if you were to start, if you could at least pretend that you didn't have a money problem, and you could start the business with the vision and the values alignment first, you would become wealthier than if you had just started trying to grasp for money in the first place. And these are the types of businesses that exit too, because when Dollar Shave Club exited to Unilever, was it Unilever? Gillette. When Dollar Shave Club had its exit,
whoever it was.
If you read the PR statement about why it was acquired, it was about the customer base. It was because there was a brand new customer base. It was mostly the young male who was not buying from Gillette. They were buying from Dollar Shave Club because the commercial was, our razors are effing great, right? It was that market rather than our parents' Gillette brand. And they knew that they could plug in different variables and different products into that same suite of customers because they were targeting a person, not just selling a product. And so when you build a business that's based on values and attracts a specific type of who, you not only get launched to profitability faster because you're speaking directly to a person, you not only get recurring customers, you not only are able to charge a higher price point because people are voting with their dollars, but you're actually putting yourself in a position to potentially sell a business to a larger firm that has a customer base that will complement that. And so the upside here of creating something that has that values alignment is many, many millions of dollars. And I think we're only now seeing the beginning of that gold rush. So I'm really glad you're making that observation, Mark.
And what I also like about that from a business standpoint is kind of to the point is like, who are you selling to? So typically, when you're selling a product, I'm selling to, expecting mothers or middle-aged men. And you have to kind of figure out that avatar. Who is this? Where are they? What are the concerns in their head? All those things. But once you figure out for this audience, then you could just apply that across a whole spectrum of products.
Yes, so, that's exactly right.
So that's like a way to really scale this thing up. Now, what about taking it to another level? And so really, when you look at a lot of these woke companies, might put things on their website like, hey, we donate to BLM or Antifa or LGBTQ or whatever these things are. We want to support, teaching trans in elementary schools or whatever, right? So they have the things that they support and they're behind. Do you think these anti-woke companies or whatever would also do something similar where they would say, hey, well, we support keeping kids safe in school, or we support whatever, something like that? Some sort of collective action, super PAC type thing?
Of course. I mean, we're already starting to see that. My story, if you will, on how politics works is when you're in power, you're mostly satisfied, and when you're out of power, you tend to mobilize and organize. And so while Trump was president, the left did more mobilization, and so they got behind more causes. The conservative side, the right, is doing that now, where we are starting to organize around causes, which is why something like a Jeremy's Razors was so perfectly timed, because people are voting with their dollars to promote those values. So we're starting to see that happen, where as these organizations are profiting, you see that they're standing for something and customers want to be a part of that story because they stand for something. There's going to be charities that are started. I think maybe a good example of this would be our friends at the Operation Underground Railroad. Right? Yeah. Operation Underground Railroad is doing amazing work rescuing kids from trafficking. And you have businesses that are making donations to support that. For example, I invested in a company called Ancient Strength. They're a protein company, and they're a health company. They sell a delicious protein powder, and a significant portion of their sales goes right to Operation Underground Railroad. When they do promotions, they're doing webinars to draw awareness of rescuing kids from trafficking rather than the benefits of eating protein. Right? That is a values alignment. That is starting a company in a saturated market. Like, who would go into a business selling protein? Right? There's so many competitors. But the founder, Mark, said, I want this to be more than just selling protein. I want this to stand for something. I want it to be a cause, like the thing that I care about most in the world, rescuing children. Yeah. So I'm going to sell protein and give a piece to it, to this cause, because I have no other way for me to make so much money that it might make a difference on this thing that matters to me so much. Yeah. And so that company, Ancient Strength, is kind of reflecting what you're talking about, where it is making a statement in where they spend their money. And that is to causes that people like us tend to support. And I think you're absolutely going to see more of that. We haven't had enough time of organizing, while the left has had more time to do that.
Yeah. It makes me think of back to stakeholder capitalism, which is kind of in direct contrast to Milton Friedman, who basically his theory was that business should only focus on profit. That's
right.
it.
Yeah.
And by focusing on profit, you get all the other benefits of like philanthropy.
Sure.
So when I drive by my local high school, I see all these businesses advertising at the high school. Why? Well, because they're supporting the community. Why are they supporting the community? Well, because they hope to get more business. Right. And so philanthropy, profit drives philanthropy. And this is a way where I think we can change the world. We can align with our values. We can make money. It's a massive opportunity. So we certainly agree on most things. And again, just to kind of highlight, the reason why it's important for you and I and everybody else to have a little bit of differences of opinion is because we just see different problems and then we come up with different solutions. And we all need to be doing it. And we come up with different solutions differently. So good stuff, Ryan. I think we've gone a long time. Big problem. Bigger problem for me than you. Either way, big problems and big solutions. We are aligned where I see massive hope and prosperity because I am extremely bullish on entrepreneurs. I'm extremely bullish on capitalism and human ingenuity and the drive for freedom. So let
me honor. Like I recognize that it's your show. Your audience is going to align with your view on the world much more than mine. And I would say if that's your take, the thing you need to do in order to impact change, start a business and get rich.
Yeah.
This if you
be an
if
owner,
you
be an owner.
Be an owner. If you believe that there is malintent among the leaders, then become a leader. If you think that there is malintent among people who own businesses and make decisions, start a business, build a really profitable one, and have your values infiltrate the rest of the world. We give so much energy and attention to people that we don't like and the things that they stand for, and so little attention to how we can spread our own values and do something about it. We give so little attention and focus to creating something that is response to the things that we don't want to see in the world and creating the vision that we want to see. Whereas I say, if we give all of our attention to creating a difference, then we won't ever have to worry about governments or big powers or organizations, because we'll be so busy creating something bigger than what they could take that they won't be able to stop us. So I say, if you are more in alignment with Mark's view of things, the best thing you can do is to create something that matches your values, that creates something for those types of customers to get fabulously wealthy, doing so in the process, and infecting change every step of the way.
Yep. Said in a short way is stop being a victim and go create the world you want. Right? So, great stuff, Ryan. I really appreciate it. This is so fun,
Mark. I enjoyed every minute of this. Thank you so much for debating me, for having me, for talking about, for standing for values of capitalism and freedom and money and investing. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you to you as well. If I do know that Own Nothing, Be Happy came from the story by Ida, I get it. But if you believe that that's their goal, to own nothing, be happy, then become an owner. Own your business, own your assets, and this is the way that you do it.
That's right.
And do it through business. All right, with that, we'll go ahead and sign it off, Ryan. Follow Ryan. Check it out, capitalism.com, on Twitter, at Ryan Moran, Moran. We'll link to it in the show notes down below. And with that, we'll sign it off. Thanks, Ryan.
Great to see you, Mark.
All right, that's a wrap. Thanks for listening to the interview I had with Ryan Daniel Moran. A little bit of a debate talking about how big the problem is. Of course, I think he's wrong and I'm right. But either way, we both see the opportunity that's there. As I was saying on the interview, this is an area that I am pivoting my business into next year, and I am going to be helping people set these businesses up. I think everybody could make $1 million next year if they do this the right way. If you'd like to know more about how I can help you, send me a message, send me an email, hit me up on social media, let me know. We'll get you into that program. We're going to be launching it next month. Other than that, create the world you want. All right? You're not a victim. You can take control of your own future, and you can create the world that you want, a better world for your future generations, and make money at the same time. That's what I got. As always, give me a thumbs up on this video if you like it. If you don't, you can give me a thumbs down, but at least leave me a comment. Tell me why. Hit that subscribe button, and that's it. To your success. I'm out.